Hello and welcome to yet another episode of our R.I.P playthrough. And why are these levels blacked out? I've already played them. Oh, I guess I cannot play them again. I see, that's interesting. So today, we'll be talking about free will. I think this is a very interesting debate to have. Philosophically very interesting. Before we start, I want to say that we want to approach this not only philosophically, but maybe also sociologically. Because recently there's been more and more debate about this Epstein controversy, and I think it's very interesting to look at this whole thing also from a sociological standpoint. So I'm gonna choose the plans and then I'm gonna focus on the topic at hand. Yeah, let's do it like this. So before we start off this talk, I think it's mostly appropriate to ask what even is a free will? As far as our human understanding goes, is that it is something that you do throughout you only. Now, let's try and go to an example of what an act of the free will would be. So, you are determined by something, right? Like, so you were born, and I said before in one of my previous videos, it seems that you would say that you didn't choose this. Now, from an internal point of view, from an internal perspective, that is in fact true. You didn't consciously choose existence. But if we look at biology, and we see what is the beginning of life, we see that the beginning of life was that the sperm travels into the egg. It's like this race of sperms going on, and the fastest one that gets to the egg first, that's the sperm that gets to turn into the living thing that comes out of it. You're in the womb for 9 months, then you are born, right? So it's quite interesting to think as how we measure our human age, because you don't really call people when they're born. I mean, you don't say they're 1 year old, right? You say they're 0 years old, even though they were already 9 months old at that point. It would be very hard to track the exact point of when a person was born, when the sperm was made. I mean, I'm not really sure how that works. I'm not really sure if we can even track that. You can probably track like how long it takes for a sperm to form in a man's body. And you can kind of, I guess, take a guess at how old the human would be exactly. It's a very interesting thing to think about, you know. But nonetheless, that's not the important thing. The important thing is, from your internal perspective, and that's the one we have to look at when it comes to free will. This just happens outside of your will. You don't consciously experience it. And I think this is the most important part of realization you have to take into this video. Is that you don't consciously experience something, therefore it is not free will. And that's very, very interesting. That is very interesting, and that is basically the most essential answer to this question as a whole. Because we already know, so you're born, from an outsider perspective, it just happens, you know it happens, you know the fastest sperm that gets to the egg, gets to survive, gets to live, right? So yeah, that is all determined. None of us choose that. None of us even remember being born. I don't even remember being like a little child, honestly. I don't really have much recollection of that at all. Like when I try to think of how I was when I was 10, I don't really remember that. It's so strange to think about that, because now you're here. So all of that was determined. And then you already know that logically, if all of that is not conscious, is not a choice of free will, then the exact opposite of that would have to be a choice of free will, right? So something that is consciously done. And that's interesting. So how much of your actions are subconscious? How much of it was determined? How much of it is even an act of free will? So starting off, we want to discuss this biological standpoint of this issue. The biological perspective on free will. It seems rather simple. It seems that you do what's in your power. Now, we actually were learning about this in philosophy, and we looked at Nicomachean Ethics. It's this book written by Aristotle, and he has this great idea of thinking about it. Like, he's saying that, well, we don't really get to choose our goals in life, but we get to choose how we get to them. So, like, choosing something that's bodily, choosing that you want to be happy, well, you didn't really choose that. It just kind of, it comes along with being human. You wouldn't really choose the goal of being unhappy. You're just choosing the ways to get to that. Like, if you look at a goal you're doing, let's say you're in a job and you're saving money for something. There's always something above that. You're saving money for a car. Okay, but that's not where it ends. Why are you saving money for a car? Well, then you go above that because you want to travel. Or why do you want to travel? Well, I don't know. Maybe you just want it as a necessity. But what is then above that necessity? You want a practical, fast way to travel. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, cool. But why? Why do you want that? We can ask endlessly. But I think the end goal we all end upon asking endlessly why you would do anything, why you would aspire for anything, is to live a fulfilling life. That seems to be the end goal of why we happen to choose all of our actions. So that is a goal that we do not choose. And beyond that lie sub-goals that we do choose as a way to get to this end goal. Live a fulfilling life. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be a objectively fulfilling life. Like, if you want to take the conservative route, live a fulfilling life, for you, that would just mean to have a family, to be loyal to them, to take care of them, and then you would just choose the means to arrive at that end. But we don't really consciously think of that. Like, you aspire for a great life, and you can kind of have a vision. You can kind of have a plan. That's why it's so important to have a strategy and to think of where you're going with all of this. And that's a very uncommon thing to do. Most people, they don't really have their life together. Like, the end goal at the point is the only thing you're thinking about, and then you're thinking about the means to get to the end. And that's very interesting, because the more conscious you are of that end, the more the means to that become actual means that you choose, and less unconscious goals in the of the self. Like, I'm trying to make the argument, and it's very complicated to put into terms, but let me try and think about how I can say this clearly as possible. Let's say the end goal is to live a fulfilling life, but as we said before, this is not a conscious choice. It's like being born. This is not a conscious choice. It's the end goal. We're not possible to choose. We're able to choose the sub goals, the means as to how to arrive at this end goal. But those can also be unconscious. If you happen to take the conservative route, which I'm not saying is a bad way to go, to have a family, take care of that family, to go into school, to study, to go into work, to do whatever, right? Now that's just the conventional and conservative way to do it. Now I'm not saying that that is not the way to do it. I'm just saying that how much of a conscious choice are you doing? Are you like making while choosing all of this? Because just like this, that choice of you being a sperm and choosing life for the sake of survival, because that is just the logical thing to do in terms of evolution, in terms of, well, the fastest sperm gets to live, right? It's just a very reasonable thing to do, but you don't really get to think about that choice. You don't really get to think about that choice of living. None of us consciously chose to live. But why then reduce yourself to whatever society tells you is the way to then deal with the life you have unconsciously chosen? You would then reduce yourself to more and more unconscious choices. And that's it's so much more complicated than that. And it's so not easy to explain for me. But I think, just to interrupt this gameplay a little, let me try and show you what I mean. So, there is the end goal. That's the fulfilling life. So let's say FL, like fair and lane, fulfilling life. And this is subconsciously chosen, just like the very beginning, which was living. And it seems that you would consciously choose everything that's in between that, but that is not the way, because you have many paths to go. And let's not try to go into examples of what those paths could be, but they can all lead here to a fulfilling life. The problem is, you don't really see it. You only see this one path of life, and then you just choose these means to reach this goal, and these means to reach this goal, and these means to reach this goal. Eventually, it will lead to a fulfilling life. But the reason why this is in the debate with the free will is that is not free will. That is not choice. That is not freedom of choice. If your goals are already chosen by your biology, which is happiness and a fulfilling life, and the ways, the means to reach that goal are chosen by society as well, which is to have a family, to have children, to work, to serve the community. If all of that is chosen by society for you, then you're just choosing the means to arrive at the goals chosen by society and biology. But how exactly are you choosing those means? And then that's very interesting to think about. Because you are then limited to options you have. You will always be limited by some kind of options you are served from society, from yourself. That is why the biggest choice, as in free will, is the thinking for yourself. Think for yourself. That is one of my essential rules for life. I've this one great podcast episode I really recommend checking it out. It's like, I think, the 5th episode, where I've, from all different philosophy, derived 5 essential rules for life, and one of those rules was think for yourself. But let's try and think more as to why it's important. And I will be repeating myself a lot in this video, but I really want to make the message very clear. So, let's go again and say it again. So, your end goal is chosen biologically. We cannot really use that. Like, unfortunately, that is the end goal, reality, a fulfilling life. The means for that can then either be chosen by you from the options you have, or chosen by society, or mix of both. Because think about it this way. Society tells you that, well, society doesn't have to like directly tell you anything, but you will see it. Like, after all, it's a clear path that all of us see in front of us. And the path is very clear. Work, studying, family, children, death. Now, whether or not you believe this is the right way to do life, that's a whole nother debate. Where is the act of thinking for yourself? Because it's very important. That's very, very important. You don't really get to choose the end goal of living a fulfilling life. Sure. But do you get to choose whether or not to have a family? Now, the thing is, if you never even think about the possibility of not doing such a thing, then it is not even a choice being made by you. You're a fucking NPC. If you just have a family because it's in your biology, then how can you even say you have some kind of wisdom? How can you even call yourself human? Like, that is what separates us from animals. It's this consciousness, this ability of having this wisdom, this logos, with which you're able to act against your biology. I think all of this is one huge battle. Living itself is one big battle against your nature. And after all, it is not bad to admit your nature. It is not bad to see yourself as human. You don't really have to have this kind of ego of trying to deny yourself that nature, going completely against it, and going into fucking monk mode and not ever having sex, not doing anything, and just thinking all day and doing philosophy all day. And being like fucking Immanuel Kant. And it's this guy, it's this philosopher that never had children. He just stayed in one village his whole life, and he just did philosophy all of the time. And I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm just saying the free will lies in even thinking about the possibility and the courage it takes to even think about such a route. If you are confident in the fact that you're not that intelligent, and not to put anyone down and not to call anyone less intelligent, but if you are genuinely confident in the fact that you're not capable of this, the conventional route in life that you see most people take, like you know what I mean, like I don't even have to explain this further on. You just know what this means when I say the traditional route in life. You know what it is. Like the average guy you see at IKEA with his wife pushing a baby in the cart, you know what that is, what that life is, right? But if you are less intelligent and less, let's say, less of a philosopher, maybe, this route is very safe for you. But where is then the courage? Because if you have the possibility of even doubting for a second anything that anyone tells you ever, why not do it? Listen, it has been historically proven once again and again and again and again, especially in Nazi reigning systems, in communism, in all of that, that some kind of downing of a system that's above you gets you punished. That has been proven again and again and again for thousands of years. This has been in the human nature. And it may not be that easy for you to doubt whatever is above you. But I want you to really think about that if there is a situation where you're not allowed to doubt something, then it is not right. It is not right. You should be allowed to doubt something and then make your own mind as to how you want to live life. Have your own free will, and that is where I think the essential question of free will lies. This question is much more complicated than that, because you can always make the argument of saying that sociologically and biologically we are all determined, like we're all biologically determined to this goal, to this end goal of living a fulfilling life. But I think if that's the only thing you let yourself be reduced to, then that's the greatest thing you can do, and that is the biggest act of free will you can make. You only have this one end goal that you cannot change, that will always be within you, but then choose the means for that as much as you can. Because the less and less you choose, the less your life becomes an act of free will. And sometimes you are determined by society. Like, sometimes you are determined by biology. Yes, I'm not saying that we have free will as much as we think. Let's try and do this like this. Listen, that's not the point I'm making. Also, you might want to say that, okay, I might not even have the option of thinking openly like this. Because you may grow up with genetics and in an environment that suppresses this kind of thinking, that suppresses thinking for yourself. And if you don't come upon this, and I don't want to sound like fucking spiritual or something, if you don't come upon this savior that tells you that you can actually think for yourself, you won't even try. You won't even see it as an option. So you can make that argument. That's very interesting. That is very interesting. Because a lot of people, they have this regret when they're old, when all of their life has passed, and they just see it slip through their fingers, and they realize, like, how much of this was really my choice? How much of this was an act of free will? So I say that if you now consciously realize that you can choose the ends to the biggest end consciously, and you can choose the means to those ends, then I say that you better enjoy those means. And you will enjoy those means, matter of fact, much more. There's a shit ton of people that are desperate in their workplaces. Why is that so? Why are people so sad, so like cynic when it comes to life? I think that is because there is no kind of track, there is no kind of courage, there is no kind of sacrifice that lies beyond all of this. I have to go to work, I have to work, like, yes, I'm forced to do that by society because I have to pay for stuff that biologically I am determined to need, and society profits of that. Logically, why would they not? It's obvious. Why make something free when we need it? There have been people that wanted to profit of water, like you have all the fucking water. I've heard of this case, and I cannot even go into detail about it because I don't have much of an understanding of the issue. So I don't want to yap about something that I'm not that fluent in. But think about it this way, like, how far can we go? Because you know now that you have to eat your human body, well, then you have to pay for food. You have to drink with your human body, well, you have to pay for water. I don't know, maybe with time you will have to pay to breathe as well. It's a very deterministic scenario. Hopefully that won't happen. Those things you don't really choose. You don't really choose your nature. You don't really choose that. I'm just saying that you can choose the fact that the ways to arrive at that end goal, they don't have to feel so depressing. It doesn't all have to feel so desperate when you know there's this greater goal you're striving upon. And this all feels, with the Epstein case, this all feels like a game of unfair odds. All the odds are stacked against you, because you have to go to work, you have to pay taxes, you have to do all this. And then there's this Epstein guys, and like I heard people say that this guy, he just gets to have his way with kids, and I mean, it all works out. Like, he doesn't even have to do all of the stuff that we do. But the thing is that, like, first of all, why would you even be jealous of that? Like, you know, I understand the point you're trying to make, saying that, okay, so this is an unfair game, but why would you even be jealous of him having his way with kids? Because if you don't want to do that yourself, then there's no reason to be jealous of that, right? Like, okay, let him do it. I don't want to do that either way. I think that's not the point we're making. I think the point people are making is that he gets to do what he wants. And you can really see how depressing that is. If we look at this society, how people don't really get to do what they want, because they are born in an unconscious decision, not even made by them, made by some kind of like tiny sperm that just evolutionarily happens to arrive at the egg first, and their whole life is determined by that. And then people get to be jealous of Jeffrey Epstein. But I say, the more you think about all of this, the more you think about that end goal of a fulfilling life, the less deterministic life will feel. The less jealous you will have to be of Epstein. Because at the end of the day, the thing you're not being jealous of, if you're morally okay and not a fucking weirdo, it's not the thing that he gets to do all of this illegal stuff, which you wouldn't even want to do either way. It's not that he gets to get away with all of this because he's most likely alive, or fucking, I mean, like, yeah. No, it's none of that. It's the fact that this is an unfair odds game where some people get to do what they want and you don't. It's not that simple. It's not that simple, and I really do recommend all of the people listening to this video to really think about that. To really think about the fact that you do have free will, in fact. And maybe it seems that some physicians would make the argument of saying that, well, atomically, on an atomic level, all of this is determined, and all of this is going to happen either way. But I think atomically you can go and suck my dick, because none of that matters either way. If from a physical standpoint the world is a different thing as to how we perceive it, well, then it does not matter at all, because the world is how we perceive it. The world is nothing else. There is no other perceiver of the world as to how we know. Therefore, there is no external world outside of us. There's no such a thing as that. Like, physics may tell you that, but physics may also tell you that all of this is determined. There's this kind of destiny at hand, and none of free will really matters. It's just an illusion of free will, and even if that was true, it does not matter. There's not a valid argument to make, because that is not the reality you live in. That is not the reality you live in. I say this once again. If we know in science that whatever vision is, you can try and explain all of that. You can try and explain all of this, that hearing are just these audio waves, vision is just light emitted, all of that, but that does not matter at all, because that is not the reality you are experiencing. So even if it does not feel like free will, we need to focus. I mean, even if it does only feel like free will and it is not free will, we need to focus at the matter at hand of what to us humans feels like free will and act upon that, because that is the only free will you have. And I think the only free will you have, and I do believe in free will, is that you get to think for yourself, and that is the biggest act of free will you can make. You can now go and think yourself and strategize. Matter of fact, strategize and write down what the end goal of your life is. And it will be a struggle, but you have to do that. You have to absolutely do that, because no matter what, no matter no matter if you're spiritual, no matter if you do believe in afterlife or you don't, it doesn't matter, because there is the possibility of this being the only life you get to live, and the end of this life is death, and there will be no life after that. But so you really have to think for yourself. You really have to go and strategize all your life beforehand and have a strategy for life. Now, another point that you can make is that society is above you. You're being tracked. Your technology, like we've seen, and we've talked about this in the previous video where we talked about Edward Snowden. He exposed all of this stuff that NSA was doing. They were tracking citizens. They know everything about you, and I think that's a fact to make. Yes, that is very true. But if, once again, you live your life how you want to, you don't really have to worry about that. There was this one great Kanye West verse where he said, "I'm as free as a homeless person," and that's the biggest fact of all. Some homeless people, I'm not saying all of them, like most of them are just fucking addicted retards. They're stupid as fuck. We don't really have to glorify those people, but some homeless people, they can be the freest people of all. Think about Socrates. The guy was a fucking genius. He was a free thinker. Think about René Descartes. Guy that said, "I think, therefore I am." And yes, that is the essence of reality. You think, therefore you are. But you're not, because you do not think. That's just it. That's the most simple way to explain why a lot of life feels deterministic. And once again, we're not trying to go in the physical understanding of free will, because it's a whole other, much more complicated topic at hand. Right? It's so much harder to explain free will from an atomic standpoint, but that's not what we're asking in this video. What we're asking is that even if there is an illusion of a free will, how do we make it as free as possible? There's only one answer, and that's to think for yourself, have a strategy for life, and then act on that strategy. And actually go into smaller means, and choose those means. Don't just choose the means for the ends chosen for you by society. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say in this video. I hope it made some kind of sense. But it's a very difficult topic to talk about, and if you have some words of your own to say for this topic, I'd be really glad to hear some counterpoints, maybe some counter arguments of your own. Because it was a whole bunch of yap, and it might have been difficult to understand, I understand. And you might also have questions as to, well, okay, but then how should I know what to do in life? How should I know what's not the conventional route? And once again, I'm saying that it can be the conventional route. Like, it doesn't have to be the opposite of that. You don't have to not have children. You can have children. You can have a family. Just saying, make it a conscious choice. Think about it. Really, go ahead and think about it. And if you don't know how to arrive at the purpose of your life, I really do recommend you go and check out my podcast episode. I'll leave it at the end of the video as the recommended video, where I talk about purpose in life, and I help you try and think about how to actually figure out that purpose. A very, very good video, very educational and amazing for people that really want to think about this life. And I think we should all be people like that. You shouldn't just live this passively, because no matter if the fact is that you get to live some life after this. This is the life you're living right now. So yeah, thanks for watching, and see you in the next one. See you.